Mark was good enough to entitle this event on our little cue sheet, 5 rabbis, no waiting. And those of us who live in the area would say just 5 guys wouldn't be bad. But not now, not now. Dessert follows. Let me introduce the gentlemen sitting on this bima. I also want to welcome my sister and brother-in-law, Ellen and Paul Newman, and Rabbi Jerry Gerland is over here. It's an honor to have you with us, Jerry. And Ron Feinstein has come all the way from Weston, wherever he is. Thank you for coming, Ron. And I'm sure others are here from elsewhere, and thank you for being here. So who are these gentlemen? In alphabetical order. This is Rabbi Steven Bob, otherwise known to us as Simcha, his Hebrew name. He is the rabbi of Congregation Eitz Chaim in Lombard, which is southwest. Actually, it sounds like a body part. I wouldn't be the first person to say that, I guess. But anyway, the southwest of Chicago. He's been the rabbi there since 1981. He is an adjunct faculty member at Wheaton College and Elmhurst College. He's very active in his URJ camp in his area of the country, Olin saying Ruby. And he has published a book recently about Jonah, and a kind of complimentary book about Jonah will come out as well very soon. Steve is married to Tammy, who's not here tonight, but we're glad that you're here, Simcha. Next up, this is kind of embarrassing, isn't it, now that I think about it? Not for me, but... So this is Norman Cohen. He's the founding rabbi of Beit Shalom, a congregation in Minnetonka, Minnesota, which is essentially Minneapolis. He's also an adjunct teacher at a variety of colleges. He helped to create the Jewish Free Loan Program of Minneapolis and served on its initial steering committee. By the way, I knew nothing about any of these guys till I looked it up on the web. So, what? And, Rabbi Cohen also comes out this way, comes to Massachusetts frequently because he did his undergrad work at Holy Cross, and he comes back to Holy Cross every year to visit with Jewish students there and Jewish faculty as well. He's married to Andrea. The two of these guys have a love of golf and scotch. Now, moving right on. Torah. So next up is Howard Sommer, whom we call Hesh. He's the director of the Wellness and Healing Center for Jewish Family Service of New Haven. He is also the coordinator of pastoral care, pastoral counseling, and community outreach services. He has a doctorate in pastoral counseling, and he got it from HUC and the Postgraduate Center for Mental Health in New York City in 1998. He has a private counseling practice in Guilford, Connecticut. For those of you who are interested, it's not so far. And he serves as he was the spiritual leader, the rabbi of Temple Beth Tikva in Madison, Connecticut, and is now there emeritus. And lastly, Elliot Strom is over here. He's the founding rabbi of Shir Ami, which is a congregation in the Philadelphia suburbs. He graduated from York University, where I just discovered. Did you go there too?
I don't admit to it.
Oh, we went to the same university. Unbelievable. We'll have to talk about this afterwards. So this guy, Rabbi Strom, in addition to being the rabbi at Shir Ami, took a 4-year course of study at the University of Pennsylvania in individual and family therapy, and he is certified as a marriage and family therapist. So if you can't get an appointment with this guy, you can go over there. American Association of Marriage and Family Therapy, he is a member. He's published several articles in various journals, and he is currently completing a final revision of his first novel, tentatively entitled Rabbi Run. This guy's married to Linda Waldman over here, there's Linda, and Elliot's married to Susie, who is down there, and we're honored that you're here as well. And final biographical detail, guess which one of these rabbis has a mother who was born in Springfield, Massachusetts? Will the rabbi, well, here it is, Simcha. His mom was born in Springfield, Massachusetts. When did she leave Springfield?
Before the Great Depression began.
So anyway, gentlemen, you all have microphones, which you will definitely need because some people may not hear you clearly, even though it feels as if the acoustics are great. So please use the mics. Everyone's got a mic. And so you want to get to know these people. As it happens, Norman, I'll get this straight. Norman and Hesh happen to have met each other on a program run by Brandeis University when they were juniors, spent time in Israel together. And as you might have guessed, Elliot and I happened to know each other for a long, long time back to high school. If you were to ask each of us to say the word A-B-O-U-T, he may be able to cover it, but I still can't. So, but you could test us later on to see if you could tell we both were born in Canada. So we've had different ways of knowing each other, but all of us together first met each other in Jerusalem. We were first-year students at Hebrew Union College, which is the rabbinic school, and the first year was spent in Jerusalem. So, my first question, and we have not practiced this or rehearsed this. What are your first memories? How did we meet? How did we get to know each other?
I don't know any of these guys.
During the opening week, as I recall, I mean, who knows what really happened, but as I recall, the very first thing in the school year was a trip to the Negev,
Mm-hmm.
and we traveled together and hiked together and learned together, and this was the first time of meeting everybody. I arrived in Jerusalem the night before that trip began. And for me, I remember sitting with people on the bus and telling stories and hearing stories and learning, oh, look at that. Oh, this is interesting. Oh, I had no idea what I got myself into. And as I began to meet the people, I knew this was going to work out quite well.
What I first recall was going to Jerusalem and thinking that I had been such a great hotshot in undergraduate school and had gotten all these great honors and things. And then I met Mark, and he started telling me about all the honors that he had gotten. And I'd already known Norman and knew all the honors that Norman had gotten. And all of a sudden I realized that nice hotshot that I was in a small town in Michigan, Kalamazoo, Michigan, was no longer the hotshot, that I was amongst many hotshots who were very bright guys.
There were actually two students from Harvard. Notice they're not here. They are elsewhere and otherwise, but they did get ordained. So that's it.
Well, I do want to say that
we'll be out of here faster than I thought.
One of the great first memories, I don't know if it was the exact first memory, but 3 of the guys that are up here were married, and 2 of us who were single guys were constantly being invited to the apartments of the married folks and being treated to wonderful exotic foods. I, for example, had grown up in Huntington, Long Island, and I did not speak Canadian, and yet I was offered these treats called Farni Navuni cookies that were so tasty that both the Shapiros and the Stroms had cases of them sent to Jerusalem to fulfill my appetite, and I'll never forget how wonderful that was. So thank you, guys.
I also recall the Shapiro's apartment in Jerusalem. I grew up in Minnesota. In Minnesota, it's cold in the winter. But in Minnesota, in the winter, when you go inside, it's warm. The Shapiros lived in a walk-up apartment. All the buildings were walk-up buildings. I recall it being like on the 17th floor. Maybe it wasn't quite that high, but I remember you'd go up and up and up and up and up, and you'd go inside and feel bad you hadn't brought an extra coat with you. The apartments weren't heated. It was the coldest winter of my life.
We had these tannoors. They were little kerosene stoves.
Very safe.
I think we lost a half a dozen students to them. Yeah.
So the deal was you could, first of all, that petroleum stuff, the neft, whatever it was called in English, it was very expensive, and you only burned it for a while to sort of warm up the room that you were in, And the deal was they warned you, do not bring this into a bedroom because you could die from the fumes.
The first thing that needs to be said is I have enormous respect for this congregation and have for a very long time. But whoever came up with the idea of putting 5 rabbis up here with microphones seems very dangerous.
Doing okay so far.
My recollection of coming to Jerusalem was I knew that I was going to do my best to look like I belonged at rabbinic school. I knew I was just a guy who liked music and sports and popular culture and novels and all the things that I loved, but I knew that I was coming to Jerusalem and I was going to be among real rabbis, and I had to do my best to somehow fit in. I knew I was an imposter. I knew that these were guys who were serious about this. And when we got to Jerusalem, the most wonderful thing happened. Because what I realized was everybody was serious about it, and everybody loved it, and everybody was taking it in the spirit that it should be taken in. And at the same time, when we were out of class, it was talking about music and sports and popular culture and the books that we were reading. And from that moment on, we formed a friendship, these gentlemen up here, a friendship that was based on our love for the rabbinate and our love for Jewish learning and Jewish life, but it was based most of all on a real love for each other that was something that transcended our rabbinic work. And the beauty of it is, through all of these years, and we're getting very valedictorian here, but through all of the years, we talk to each other constantly about what are you teaching and what are you learning and what are the issues that you're facing, and check in with each other all the time. But the most wonderful thing is we check in with each other regularly about music and sports and check in with each other how we are doing, because from the moment that we arrived in Jerusalem together, something wonderful happened, and that's why we're up here tonight. There was a friendship that was created that is, for all of us, I think, the real center of everything that we do.
How are those Phillies doing?
Okay,
I remember in Jerusalem when Mark Dov Shapiro didn't know the difference between the Milwaukee Brewers and the Boston Red Sox. And we convinced him that the B on the hat was the Brewers. Well, but what I wanted to say in conjunction with Elliot was, I think that what Elliot's talking about was formed during that first year, both through our classroom activities and our out-of-classroom activities, because I think that every one of us up here has found, I think, the secret of the rabbinate to be the importance of being serious on the one hand and knowing how to have a good time and enjoy ourselves on the other. And I think that's what happened that first year. In class, we worked hard. We had a good time in class too, but we worked hard, took it seriously. We had a lot to learn. But out of class, we had lots of celebrations and parties. And poker games. Thank you, Elliot. Yes. Yes. And I think that balance is what keeps us, I think, happy doing what we're doing. Because what we do, as you know, is not always about happy things. As I was sitting there listening when we were supposed to share stories about you, 3 people immediately got my ear, and all of them had a funeral story. And the significance in your life, in their life, of your role, and it was beautiful to hear, because, you know, to us, we remember you from Jerusalem.
I want to tell you all that one of the connections and that cemented the friendship with your rabbi was when we were students in Jerusalem on Shabbat morning. Mark and I would go to as many different synagogues as we could throughout Jerusalem. We davened together almost every day, but on Shabbat we would pick a different synagogue. And we had some amazing experiences, and I just want to relate two of them to you. One was that we promised each other that if it ever snowed in Jerusalem the year that we were there, we would make a mad dash to the wall and daven at the wall that morning. And one morning it snowed 12 inches in Jerusalem. The entire city was shut down. It was so bad that the army actually had trucks on corners with bread in the trucks to feed people because people couldn't get around. But the two of us schlepped down to the wall. We were the only two people at the wall. There was one other guy, kind of the guy who's always there. But there is a guy actually that's always there. But fortunately, he left the two of us alone. And I think everyone in this room can understand what I'm now going to explain. You know how it is when it snows, and that quietness that descends around us and it envelops us. Now picture it at the wall, with the snow coming down. The two of us were just standing there at the wall and praying together, and it was beautiful. It was just amazing. Now I'm going to link that to something that happened just a few years ago, when it turned out that the Shapiros ended up on Kauai the same week that Linda and I were on Kauai. And I said to Mark, want to pray together? And we walked and we sat down on a bench overlooking the Pacific Ocean, and we davened together. Over 40 years later, two guys who had enjoyed the beauty of Jerusalem, and then Kauai. That's a link for us. You know, here's the funny part. So one Shabbat morning, we go to a small little shtiebel, and the service was lovely. And at the end of the service, this very young man comes up to us and he says, "You must come to my home for Shabbat lunch. I'm newly married and it's a mitzvah to bring strangers to your home for Shabbat." So we reluctantly went because Marcia wasn't with us, and I was actually looking forward to going back to the Shapiro's home and having lunch. But we went, Mark and I. And this poor young woman, this newly married young woman, did not know how to cook or bake. And she had made challah. And unfortunately, she had read the recipe. Do you remember this? She had read the recipe incorrectly. And instead of sugar, she put salt. Can you taste that? Can you taste that? He kept smiling and eating just one of the wonderful Shabbat mornings.
So I don't remember that. I do remember once it was in Jerusalem, in downtown Jerusalem, not in the old city. We went to some service and they gave us an aliyah. And after the aliyah, they said, "And that'll cost you." I don't know what they said. We had no money. It was Shabbat anyway. That will cost you X number of liras in those days.
Right.
And I remember going to pay on Sunday. We were so dutiful, we actually walked to the place and we paid for the aliyah. Had we known, we might not have volunteered for the aliyah.
So for me, this is kind of, I go back with your rabbi a very long way.
Can you turn that mic off, please?
We were in high school together. We were in youth group together. We planned out a great many Yom Kippur afternoon youth services together. We go back a long way. But I think the best story that I know of your rabbi is one that actually happened before I knew him. And to me, it is quintessential Mark. The story is in second grade in York Mills, our area of town. And in the second grade, there was to be a party. And unfortunately, the kids were talking and realized there were just going to be too many people and they couldn't all be invited. And so Kathy McFarland suggested, why don't we just not invite the Jews? At which point, Mark punched Kathy McFarland. Now, I want to ask you, you've had 25 years with the man. Can you see him punching anyone? That's how much he loves his people.
There's only one error. That was Heather Commodore. You remember Kathy McFarland for another reason.
I swear I didn't touch it. Seriously. Good night, everyone. I like my story.
I'll remind you later about her. So, how's it been being a rabbi?
I've never punched anybody.
I don't think I have since then either. The key to the story, of course, in second grade was there was only one Jew in the class, also, who was me. But
Thank you for telling us. When we applied to Hebrew in college, they did not ask us if we were Jewish.
oh, that's true.
So thank you for coming out. When I applied to HUC, I was interested in a career in which the line between what I was going to be doing because it was my job and what I was going to be doing because I wanted to be doing would be blurred. And that's exactly how it's turned out to be. Lots of times I find myself involved in activities, everybody else is there in their free time, they're choosing to do it, I would choose to do it as well. I'm doing it because it's my work. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, we went, 3 people from our congregation, we went to visit a sister community in Siberia. Walking to a place called Chelyabinsk, the end of the earth. And the 2 other guys are talking, just explaining how they got out of work to come on the trip. And they turned to me and I said, I'm working. So that has been exact as I hoped it would be. And I love being a rabbi. I can't imagine not being a rabbi. It's the core of who I am.
I don't think, I suppose whenever you become something, or wherever you choose to do anything, you never know what it's going to turn out to be. It's a really curious thing. You could never anticipate it, because each of us grew up in a synagogue, so we at least knew 1 or 2 or 3 rabbis. So something about them made us think that we should be rabbis, but I don't think we could ever fathom what it actually was going to turn out to be.
Well, when we were 22 years old beginning HUC, we couldn't imagine what that was really going to be. We didn't know any 22-year-old rabbis.
We did. Do you remember, I don't know if all of us have done this, Hank Skirball ran that little seminar?
The God Squad, he called it.
Hank Skirball, still alive, is a great, great rabbi. He was the head of NIFTY and just a wonderful, wonderful man who made Aliyah. So I suspect that when we met him in 1972, he must have been in his 50s, I think, just a kid. What?
We didn't think so at the time.
No. So I think he has to have been in his 50s or something like that. Anyway, we had this seminar that he gave us in his apartment. And it wasn't for everybody. I don't know how this happened, but somehow we ended up there. And somebody liked his Harvard rocker. He had a Harvard rocker in there, I remember. But that's beside the point. Do you remember he gave us situations to imagine, what would you do if you were a rabbi and such happened? I remember one of them. We had a role play, and I think he played the patient, and it had something to do with, you're the rabbi and you're in the hospital and someone asks you to pray for them. So we asked each one of us to figure out, that's what I recall at least, so what would you do? And well, since then we've more or less, 1,000 times we've experienced that, but it's not infrequent that I think about Hank Skirball, and I don't know what he said we ought to do, and I don't know what I said at the time or what anybody else said, but I remember that particular moment. I remember how sweet and wonderful he was, but that moment, because we were 22 and we certainly didn't know. None of us expected for him to ask that question that day. Turns out we've been asked that a lot. So what else have you liked about this, Norman?
To me, the connection that we have across the miles and across time is it's transcendent. And I think that it's almost as if when we're on the phone with each other, it's like we're back in Jerusalem on one level. I feel that deep connection, and I think that nourishes me, and I think it nourishes all of us. There isn't a week that goes by that we don't share some story or some challenge in our congregation, and we help each other because we're reality checks, and sometimes the situation seems to be almost absurd or impossible to deal with, and I think there's nothing in our rabbinates that has been impossible to deal with, and it's because of the friendships that we have, and I think that's a model for our congregants, because I think our congregants see us as nourished by our friendships and nourished by our relationships, and in a sense we're offering them guidance in life, and that's been, for me, what sustained me in my rabbinate all these years. So I don't have jokes, he does.
A few years ago, Hesh came to Chicago to speak with the Chicago Reform rabbis, and the next day, the associate rabbi who works with me was commenting to me that she thought it was so cute that I called you Heshi. And I said, it's his name. And she pointed out to me that no one else in the room was calling him Heshi, but we use affectionate terms with each other because it expresses how we feel. We were once at a class dinner at one of the rabbis' convention, and Betsy, who's the wife of one of our colleagues, said, "Oh, I get to go to dinner with my husband's fraternity brothers." It's an odd fraternity, but we're proud to be part of it.
It is true, we got these names.
We can't say all the names right now.
Anyway, Steve is Simcha because that's the name. When we were there at HUC that year in Jerusalem, we used our Hebrew names all the time. So some stuck more. So
there were
Steve
7 Stevens.
Well, that might have.
We had 7 Stevens in our class.
It was a large class, a class of 10. I changed my name and you did, but you did. But, so I think that's it? Oh, I guess you learn something every day.
We learned that Kishmo Kenhu, he is like his name.
Right, Simcha means joyfulness, so there he is. And Hesh, I don't know, you wanted that a lot, didn't you? The Hesh part.
Hesh is fine, right.
Yeah.
The Heshi is
Not for public events and occasion. I mean, I understood.
But I just, following up what Simcha said, when I see these guys, and I don't see them as frequently because I went to the New York school and they all went to the Cincinnati school, but when I do see them and I talk with them, the now decades from when we started vanish immediately. I don't see them as the Altacockers that they are now. I see them as the little pishers that we all were. And in some respects, that's part of the love that we have for each other, because we remember each other at that moment, at that vulnerability. We can connect on that level as we have grown and matured and had incredible careers. I mean, I think that, of my looking at my colleagues here, all of them have succeeded. They have done what we thought we would do when we went into the rabbinate, and that is, we thought we would change the world. At that time, we thought that the world actually meant the globe. But now we realized our maturity, if we have any, is in realizing that the world that we've helped to change are those individuals like all of you whose worlds have been changed because you have been fortunate enough to have Rabbi Mark Dov Shapiro as your rabbi. And in that respect, fortunately, all 5 of us know that we have succeeded, that we have changed the world.
Well, that's why I like to talk to these guys. This is a great Erev Rosh Hashanah sermon. But you've all heard it. But there are 3 congregations that haven't heard it. That's beautiful, Hesh. See, that's why it's good to spend time together, because you never know when someone might say something you never quite thought of. I never thought of that in quite that way. That's really beautiful. Thank you. I think I might become a rabbi now. It is true, I guess. I'm not sure. Well, we all went in expecting certain things to happen. But again, I don't think we could have imagined where we would end up, obviously. We couldn't have imagined that, or how life would run its circles and what would amount to, how would it all work out, what the story would be like. I think when you look back on it, it seems, well, it was meant to be that way, because all the pieces did fall in place. We're all in the right place at the right time. But boy, you never could have anticipated the journey. I remember Elliot had serious surgery and other things in 1990.
By the way, we do everything together. And because I had brain surgery, Mark decided he would have it as well.
So in it was 1990. 90? Okay, I'll take your word for it. I think you might know that.
I was there.
Yeah. But you wrote a sermon after that about life and journeys, I think around that time. Or you have written a sermon like that.
Or I will someday.
Right. So I do remember you wrote a sermon about that journey and how you found yourself at the right spot at the right time. Yeah. It's the same kind of thing. But that was the occasion. Who would have thought such a thing would ever happen to you or to me or other kinds of maladies? But those kind of become part of the puzzle too.
And I think that I don't know if this is something that everyone experiences, but my guess is probably it's true, that we imagine our futures and then we live our lives, and the lives don't necessarily match up with the futures that we anticipated. And I suspect that you've all had the feeling that I know I have, and I think maybe we all have, of looking around and saying, how did I get here? What I remember really well is going to my first URJ, well, it was UAHC back then, my first UAHC convention after being ordained. I was in my pulpit for a very short while. The convention was in Toronto, and I remember wherever I went in the convention, that someone would invariably shout, "Rabbi," and about 700 people would turn. And what I realized was that it was many years before when someone who was actually calling me in my congregation would say, "Rabbi," it would be a long time before I would realize they were talking to me, and I would turn around. Because when we were in Jerusalem, there was really that sense of we had an idea of where we might end up being, but then we lived our lives, and we ended up in places that, I don't think any of us ended up in places that were very close to our original homes. And those became our homes, and the communities in which we lived became our real sources of friendship and our sources of meaning every day. And as we've lived through the years, we get used to where we are, but every once in a while there's that voice that says, how did you get here? How did you serve 25 years in Springfield, Massachusetts? How did you, and I'm 35 years in my pulpit in Pennsylvania, and looking at retiring at the end of June this year, and there's an overwhelming sense of, this is just, how did it happen? How could it possibly be? And I think for us, the touchstone is not only Jerusalem, but the touchstone for us is checking in with each other. And that's how we know the constancy of who we are, by the constancy of our relationship with each other. That's been there for a very long time. And when we think about how many years it is mind-blowing.
Let's do one more question. Every time we go to a rabbinic convention, somebody is responsible from our class for organizing a reunion of our class. So I think the first rabbinic convention was 1978. Well, because we were ordained in 77, so you couldn't have gone to one before that. So the first convention we all, I don't know if everybody was there. It was 78, I think. We were living in Toronto. The convention was in Toronto, so we had something at our house, at our apartment. And since then... We had heat then. We had heat.
Those fancy Canadian apartments.
Well, I had a job, so we could afford heat. Mind you, everybody had to bring wood with, to keep the place. So we were at your place once. We were in Chicago. Hesh, wait a second. You haven't hosted us yet. Well, he's been in Connecticut, so they don't have conventions in Connecticut. Philadelphia.
I think the next convention, the next Rabbis convention is in Enfield, I'm pretty sure.
Right. At the Holiday Inn, you can all be there. You'll have a great time. So I forgot what the question was. I was going to say, have we had conventions? Yeah. We'll close out with that. You got a nice convention mention? Yeah, I'll get it. So convention memories. One quickie from all of our various conventions we've been at. This may be hard because you go, whoa, my God, I don't know. I've been thinking about it for at least 2 minutes.
I had brain surgery. I can't remember anything.
I did too. What? You can talk. Yes. Norman, yes. Go ahead.
Well,
We did. Norman came. Yes. Yeah, after I had surgery, right? Yeah, that was it. Yeah, the day I had.
to be together, so we knew
Yes.
Mark couldn't come to the... Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. I told you I need this guy. We always had reunions at conventions. That's what we're talking about. Everyone hosts it, and you pick out a good restaurant, and you also, not just a restaurant, you plan the entertainment, which is a very important part of our convention. So one year, Mark couldn't come to the convention.
It was the year I had the surgery.
Right. So I came to Springfield. We had a convention in Springfield, and I arrived at the door, and Mark and Marcia put a sign on the door. This is the alternate CCR convention for this year. I knew I was in the right place.
Yeah, you were. And we went out to dinner, and wherever the convention was, we called you guys, wherever you were. I don't remember.
This was before Skype.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Old-fashioned What's that? Oh, was it?
It was in Toronto,
I was the chair of the convention. That's right. Anything to get out of a responsibility. That's right. Yeah, it was in Toronto. So what?
So I got the real convention because you were the planner of it.
That's right. We sat there for 3 solid days with everything. Simply, you're on. Uh-oh, that's not fair. Sorry.
Well, you're all invited to Chicago. The convention's in Chicago in March. I'm in charge of the dinner.
We'll be there.
So most of us were born in 1950. So the theme of our dinner in March of 2014 is, will you still feed me when I'm 64?
And you were responsible for the Chicago convention when we were...
A long time ago, yeah.
Do you remember what it was? I know what you put on the invitation. You put on the invitation, it's an I've known you for half of my life party. Because we were then, it was 1994, we were 44.
So I'll be serious. I think that what I remember really are the conversations. So a couple of years ago in Boston, we went for the 3 of us were the three of us went for a walk, and we were solving the problems of our lives and the problems of the world and the problems of our congregations. You know, so that you may think that Rabbi Shapiro is the rabbi here by himself, but he's not. You know, he has a team. We're the team. I want to take personally responsibility for all of his best ideas. And there's things that we do in my congregation that I learned from Rabbi Shapiro. We've learned things from each other and from other friends of ours, and it's really important that no one should have to work alone. And I think that sometimes people who do our kind of work allow themselves to get isolated, and it grinds on them. And it's important to have support. And some people have manufacturer support. For us, it's really organic. And these conventions are a time to have these have the conversations. And some of them are lighthearted, and some of them are really profound.
And Elliot had mentioned before that one of the commonalities that we all found with each other was the joy of sports. And one of the things that I always remember about CCR conventions is whenever it was in a city where there was a baseball team, we would go to a game. We went to Three River Stadium when it was in Pittsburgh one year.
I think it's still in Pittsburgh.
Oh, it is still in Pittsburgh. When the CCR was in Pittsburgh. We went to Montreal. We went to see the Expos play. And
Cincinnati. That's where
right,
you got me.
Right.
Wrigley Field.
And one time,
Wrigley Field, we froze
I
to
was
death.
actually in Chicago going with Linda and my daughter. Linda had a medical convention there. And the first thing I thought of was to contact Simcha and to say, are the Cubs playing? Let's go to a Cubs game. We went to the Cubs game. It was like the beginning of April. It was like the first week of baseball season. It snowed during most of the game. And my daughter Leah was what, about 10 or 11, 12 at the time. She kept saying, do we have to stay for this? We were having a great time. So to me, it
played the Reds.
And back to the theme of snow again.
Right.
So the truth of the matter is that for me, it's not so much the memories of the conventions as it is to suggest that what you have before you is 5 unconventional people. And I especially want to say a word about my friend, Rabbi Mark Dov Shapiro, who in the best possible way that I can imagine is an unconventional man and an unconventional rabbi. What makes your rabbi wonderful, among other things, is that whatever is the accepted for everyone else is what causes him to ask questions. Why does it need to be that way? Is there a way that it could be done better? Maybe we should throw it out and do something even more interesting and more appropriate. And every time I turn around, he is doing something unconventional here. Whether it's the Shabbat work or whether it's the God survey, I hope you understand, I know you understand, that's why you're here, that what makes Mark exceptional is that Mark hews to his own path. He's constantly asking questions. Sometimes he's a pain in the neck asking questions, but it's never just, that's the way it's done, that's the way everybody else is doing it, that's the way I'm going to do it. It's always that moment, and I can see the wheels turning, and I can see the eyes going bright as he says, I got another idea. I've known Mark for a long time, and what makes him exceptional, I think, is that he does it his own way, and in the most wonderful way that I can imagine, he is an unconventional, and in that sense, unique and marvelous rabbi. But he doesn't know anything about sports.
I just want to dovetail on what Elliot just said and whet your appetites for tomorrow morning and Torah study. because I think to be able to have appreciated, as you have for this quarter of a century, this wonderful rabbi, also must make you a unique congregation. And in that respect, I have some things to say in Torah study tomorrow that will tie the two of those together.
Stay tuned.
I think we should stop while we're ahead. Well, I'm ahead. Oh, as close as we're going to get. Let's take a break. And I think we need to return to our Siddur. And actually, we're going to look at recall some memories. So, gentlemen, you are dismissed. Good night, guys.